In this video you will learn how to respond when your opponent plays the Danish Gambit. After the moves e4, e5. Now, white can play d4, occupying the center with his pawns and immediately attacking the e5 pawn. This is the so-called center game. Now, the best response for black is to capture on d4, to destroy the opponent's pawn center and force the opponent's queen into the open field. If now white captures on d4 with the queen, then the queen comes into play too early and black can take advantage by attacking it and gaining development tempos. After knight c6, the white queen has to retreat. The best retreat for the queen is e3, aiming against the black king and avoiding the d5 move by black. Black can play knight f6, developing his king's knight. Black's plan is to continue with bishop b4 check, and if the bishop is attacked with c3, then he can go to the a5 square, then reposition himself on b6 and attack the opponent's queen again. If now white advances with e5, to attack the black knight. Black responds with knight g4, attacking the white queen and the e5 pawn. White can try queen e2, to try to pin the black knight in case he captures the e5 pawn. But the white queen is badly positioned and now black can play d6, increasing the pressure against the e5 pawn and sacrificing a pawn. After e takes d6 check. Black plays bishop e6. And after d takes c7, black responds with queen takes c7 and has the advantage. Black has sacrificed a pawn, but his pieces are all ready to enter the fight quickly, while white is far behind in development. After the move knight f6, white can play bishop d2, developing his queen's bishop and taking control of the b4 square, to prevent black's bishop from giving check on that square. Black can play bishop e7, developing his king's bishop and preparing to castle. White can play knight c3, developing his queen's knight and preparing to castle on the long side. Black can play d5, reacting in the center and threatening to advance with d4, which would win material. For example, in case of e5, black plays d4 and has the advantage. And, if white captures on d5, black plays knight takes d5 and balances the game without problems. For example, in case of queen g3, black can play knight c to b4, threatening to capture on c2. If now white castles on the queen side, black plays knight takes c3 and wins. Since after bishop takes c3, black answers knight takes a2 check. And after king b1, then queen takes d1 check follows and black wins. And if after the move knight takes d5, white captures on d5 with his knight, black captures on d5 with his queen and can continue with moves like bishop f5 or bishop g4, he can castle on the queen side and then place his rooks on the central files and has an advantage. Now, white cannot castle on the queen side since black would capture the a2 pawn. And if white plays knight e2, with the idea of bringing the knight to the c3 square, to attack the black queen, black can castle, to put his king in safety and bring the king's rook into play. After knight c3, black can play queen h5 or queen a5. White can castle on the queen side. Black can play bishop e6, completing the development of his minor pieces and aiming against the enemy castling. Black will be able to move his rooks closer to the central files and could prepare a strong attack against the opponent's king. For example, if white plays a3, to try to avoid the attack. Black plays bishop takes a3, sacrificing the bishop and is winning. Since after b takes a3, queen takes a3 check. King b1, follows knight b4 and the white king will not be able to avoid the checkmate. Moving back a few moves, after the capture on d4, white can sacrifice another pawn with the move c3. The Danish Gambit. White gives up more material, with the idea of speeding up his development. Now, the best response for black is d takes c3, accepting the pawn offered. White can play bishop c4, developing the king's bishop to a good diagonal. Black can capture the pawn on b2. And after bishop takes b2. White has given up 2 pawns but has moved ahead in development and his bishops are dangerously pointing towards the kingside. Now, black must play with some precision. For example, the move d5, giving back a pawn to speed up development, is not good, as white captures the pawn with the bishop and after knight f6. Now white can play bishop takes f7 check. And after king takes f7. White captures the black queen. Black can play bishop b4 check, with the idea of capturing the queen with the rook. But white plays queen d2. After bishop takes d2 check. Knight takes d2, the endgame is equal. After the move bishop takes b2, the best move for black is knight f6, developing the king's knight and preparing to react in the center with d5. If now white plays knight c3, developing the queen's knight and increasing control over the d5 square, black can play d5 anyway. After knight takes d5. Knight takes d5. Bishop takes d5. Black plays bishop b4 check and is now ready to castle. After king f1. Now, it would be a serious mistake to castle, as white plays queen d4 and wins, as he threatens to checkmate on g7 and also threatens to capture the enemy bishop. After the move king f1, black can play c6, attacking the opponent's bishop, with the idea of driving him out of the center and then exchanging queens. The best option for white is bishop takes f7 check. After king takes f7. White can play queen b3 check, with the idea of regaining the piece. After bishop e6. White captures the bishop on b4, regaining the piece. But black can play queen d3 check. After knight e2. Black plays rook d8 bringing his king's rook into play. Black's king can hide on the kingside and black's pieces are ready to attack the opponent's king. For example, in case of rook e1. Black plays knight d7, completing the development of his minor pieces. Now it is not possible to capture the b7 pawn with the queen, since black plays rook to b8, attacking the queen and the bishop on b2. After queen c7. Black captures the white bishop, and after queen takes d8, black plays queen takes e2 check and wins. Since after rook takes e2. Black plays rook b1 check and after rook e1. Black plays bishop c4 check. And after king g1. Rook takes e1 is checkmate. After the move knight f6, the best option for white is to advance with e5, with the idea of attacking quickly. But black can respond with d5, a typical reaction in this type of position. Black counterattacks against the enemy bishop and frees up his position. If now white plays bishop b5 check. Black simply responds with knight f to d7. He can continue with the move c6 and has no problems. And if after the move d5, white captures on f6. Black can first give check with his bishop on b4, before capturing the white bishop on c4. After, for example, bishop c3. Black plays bishop takes c3 check, and after knight takes c3. Black captures the bishop on c4 and is threatening to capture the f6 pawn with the queen. White can capture on g7, attacking the black rook. Black can play rook g8, to defend his rook. White can play queen f3, to avoid the queens being exchanged. But black plays knight c6, developing his queen's knight. After, for example, rook d1, bringing the queen's rook into play and attacking the opponent's queen. Black responds queen e7 check. And after knight g to e2. Black can play knight e5, attacking the white queen and threatening to jump with the knight to the d3 square. After queen g3. Black plays knight d3 check and then can continue with moves like bishop e6, queenside castling, and black's advantage is obvious.